What's up, everybody? Welcome and welcome back. And if you notice that the audio is not quite synced with my lips, then you would be correct. I decided not to turn the microphone on when I was filming this, so now my pretty cute little scenic area is completely wasted. We're not gonna use that footage. You guys are stuck with me in my little room here. I prefer to have nice, pretty backdrops, but I'm not refilming. Well, I am refilming. I'm not going back out there to refilm just for this section here, so bear with me, guys. Today, we are going to dip back into the world of stun guns, PCCs, cute little things. I love these. With us today, we have the MP9, the TP9, I guess. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and let's get started. So, B&T makes these pretty little ladies, which, of course, unfortunately for us as civilians, we don't get the full benefits of subguns. Unfortunately, you can't put an FRT in one of these just yet, but who knows, that could change in the near future. There's always new things coming out for them, so I would be excited to see that. Obviously, these are in 9mm, and like all other civilian subguns are, quite frankly, overpriced for what they are. This girl right here will run you about $2,000 and change, 25-ish, which breaks my heart because I do love firearms like this. I think they are so fun to use, but obviously not a first suggestion considering the price and for what they really are. You get one of these because they're a fun range toy, not because you expect to have it in a shit hits the fan kind of scenario. There's definitely better options on the market that won't run you this price with way better reliability and performance. Of course, the major difference between the TP9 and the MP9s is the firing modes, full versus semi-auto, but another difference here is that the MP9s traditionally do have larger charging handles. So if we want to talk about the MP9, the TP9, then I think it's only fair we go back to her older sister, the TMP, Tactical Machine Pistol, which was first introduced by Steyr Mannlicher back in 1989 and was seen as a low-cost competitor to the MP5K. They cut costs by introducing the polymer frames, which also helped reduce weight. And I say seen as a competitor, but they very quickly fell off the market. Steyr went and discontinued them in 2001, presumably due to Austrian export laws. Austria at the time had cracked down pretty hard on subguns, which low sales, difficult exports, really wasn't a profitable product for Steyr at the time. And in 2001, they discontinued the TMP from their lines and sold the rights to B&T. B&T went and decided to continue development and re-released it back into the wild as the MP9s in 2004. Of course, they wanted to upgrade. Why put the same shitty product back out? So major differences between the TMP and the MP9s, TP9s, are going to include the addition of the side folding stock here, which I'm a sucker for these. I don't know why. I think they're so cool looking. I think they're neat. I don't know. So good bonus points on that one. But B&T did include an integrated pick rail, which for modern uses has to be kind of necessary to have. People use a lot of attachments now. You can even see how souped up this one is. It's almost necessary at this point to have ample spots for attachments, whether it be pick rail, M-lock, whatever. B&T did also include an upgraded trigger safety. You can see here that it does have that little safety mechanism in the trigger, so you have to pull that before pulling the whole thing. I say upgraded, I still think it's shit. We'll get more onto that in a little bit here. In addition to the base MP9s, of course, they did introduce other variants. The MP9N made its way to market very shortly after and included the ambi lever safeties instead of the push controls that you see. And then of course there is the mythical MP45, which showed her face on a gun showroom once, never to be seen or heard from again. Now if you search MP45, you're probably gonna get the Smith & Wesson M&P45, which is a very different firearm, though a good one, but not quite what we're looking for. Although with the popularity of these types of firearms kind of resurging into the market, And you see a lot of companies making variations of 9mm and 45 now. Who knows, maybe this is something B&T will revisit. I don't think so, but that would be cool, I guess. And of course, there are all of the TP9 variants as well, which most of the same types of changes follow through between the versions. But the TP9N also does include an empty socket here for the foregrip. And then the TP9 Pro has side-mounted ambi charging handles, which is pretty cool. I'm a fan of those, considering this charging handle is kind of a Minecraft brick. I don't understand who thought that was comfortable, but it works. And then in addition to that, they did put on new pick rails and M-lock on either side, as well as a flat-faced trigger. All that being said, I think it's only fair, since the TMP was supposed to be an MP5K competitor, and this should be the upgraded version, that we compare these to the MP5Ks. Check out my MP5, MP5K video if you guys haven't already. There are upgrades on both the guns used in that video, the MP5s and this gun here. So obviously, some give or take here in regards to performance. The upgrades on this are largely just accessories, whereas the MP5 did have some other components and buffer weights and things put in. But I will compare to kind of the bases, just to keep it fair. While both of those guns do have aftermarket parts available for them, the TP9s really don't have all too much in regards to options. There are other triggers that you can put in, though there's like two. One of them is impossible to get to, and the other one's not really the best. Whereas the MP5s have a huge slew of aftermarket parts available for them. MP5 clones are super easy to put together, super cheap to do. I say this is like $2,500, which is expensive. Obviously, if you go and get an HK one, that's gonna run you probably like $8,000. So I don't know, something absurd like that, which is ridiculous. But it is so easy to put together a clone and have it still work well, reliably, and not cost you an arm and a leg to do, and really tweak those little performance bits to what the individual shooter might prefer. I think we could all agree that the MP5, MP5Ks are iconic. It's a firearm we all know. It's a design we're all familiar with, and I think a lot of us can pinpoint that silhouette just because of how iconic they are. But I do appreciate the shape of the TP9. They wanted to kind of modernize it, make it more ergonomic, and it is an attractive silhouette. Won't take that away from them, but at least for me and my smaller hand sizes, I do find the MP5s, MP5Ks to be a bit more in line with my hands, making them a little more ergonomic for me to use. Not that this is bad by any means, but you can't see here that my thumb kind of just grazes where the mag release is. I can reach it. I do have to pivot a little bit, which isn't that big of a deal, but the grip is obviously larger for my hand. Especially considering the foregrip here, I can compensate for that grip, so it's not a problem, and I can reach the safeties and everything else fine. Just preferences that I do think the MP5Ks are a bit nicer to hold. I'd go ahead and compare the weight, but this chonky boy has a lot of extra additions on her right now, as well as the MP5K. But bare bones, this does go about just a little hair over 3 pounds, whereas the MP5Ks are closer to that 5 mark. I love PCC type guns, and I always think it is so funny that the trend is to get a tiny compact gun, weight reduction, just for all of us to modify and make them beefy again. But then again, if we put them on full-sized weapons, then that would just be that much heavier, so it works. But yeah, in theory, the TP9 is lighter. They're different lengths, so depending on the lever arm, you may or may not feel it. I do stand by this being lighter, especially because you can comfortably pull it in regards to being lighter. I do think the MP5s have less felt recoil. That could be a combination of things, whether it be the weight helping. The TP9s have a rotating barrel, which is not as common for a blowback system. That might be adding to some of that recoil. I say this, but it's 9mm, which means you're not feeling much to begin with. It feels almost silly to bring up, but I do think there is a noticeable difference between the shots. It also didn't help that when I was shooting this, the trigger is so heavy, and since I wasn't used to it, I was absolutely whipping the gun. which of course is going to affect my perception of recoil. This was my first time shooting it, so the trigger pull I wasn't quite used to. I frequently thought the gun was either malfunctioning or empty just because I pulled and nothing happened. Stupid on my end, and I got better with it as the day went. But just to kind of put into perspective how heavy the trigger actually felt for me compared to what I am used to. And then in addition to that, I was shooting supers. It was zeroed for subsonics, which meant my POI was just a little to the right. And that's an easy thing to adjust for, but in combination of kind of whipping it due to the trigger, slightly higher recoil, and my point of impact being a little off compared to what zeroing is, I might be propagating how much recoil actually is noticed. I mentioned the folding stock. It's a feature I absolutely love, even if it's just for the sake of storage or transporting or aesthetics. But the TP9 stock folding is actually extremely smooth. This might just be a conversation of usage because this firearm here has been beat to hell and very worn in, whereas the MP5Ks, the folding stock that was placed on that was very new, still hasn't had that much rounds run through it, hasn't been folded in and out often, so it's stiff. And of course, we expect that from a brand new product, but this does come on the firearm. It was built, intended to have it there, whereas the MP5K was an aftermarket part. So I will give a lot of credit to how easy this is to fold in and out, whereas with a lot of other folding stocks that I add on afterward, including the MP5K, you almost have to punch them to get them to unfold, which can hurt. There's a trick to it. So I will give B&T a lot of credit for this one. One feature that I think is pretty neat for the TP9s is the integrated adapter for a suppressor. It is a rotating barrel, so there's the sleeve around the barrel that the suppressor locking is integrated with. I think it winds up looking super crisp when everything's all put together, very smooth additions. But on the topic of a suppressor, the TP9s aren't exactly known for their reliability. They do function better if you have a can on it. While I was out shooting this, I did not have any malfunctions occur, minus my made up malfunctions from the trigger. But through usage, I know a lot of people do wind up running into feeding issues, and especially once you get these to temperature. I wasn't firing rapidly at all, but for someone who's doing a lot faster shots, you're probably gonna see those reliability issues a lot more. The can will help some, not to say it won't be without problems, but the MP5s also have their own slew of reliability issues. I attribute both of these to the magazines, and I'm sure it does make a difference what ammo you do or don't run in. But regardless, I do think the MP5s have slightly less issues. Take that as you will. So one of my biggest gripes with the MP5s Ks is the lack of bolt hold. Makes for a lot slower reloads, and since they're not firearms that I frequently use, the muscle memory isn't there, which means I wind up sitting awkwardly at the range, just kind of trying to figure out what's happening for a second. It's not quick, it's not intuitive for me. I really should take them out more, but it takes a second for it to click in my head that that's what I need to do. So I will give the TP9 some love in that the bolt will hold open, making reloads just a touch faster, smoother to do. But for neither of these guns, the magazine will drop. Not the end of the world, it's still pretty quick, something less to notice, but they will retain. You do have to grab them out. That one doesn't bother me all that too much. So while I can give pros and cons to both the MP5s and TP9s, I think B&T has a reputation, in my opinion at least, of making fun stuff that's just a hair overpriced for what it should be. The Strybog is kind of the same situation. I think that's nicer to shoot than the SPC9, and of course the B&T one is more expensive. Not that it's bad, it's just that a lot of their firearms, I think you can get cheaper equivalents that really have equal performance, if not slightly better. And especially considering the ability to really modify aftermarket part-wise with other firearms, I think that kind of detracts away from B&T products like the TP9 here. Granted, I like collecting these kinds of things. They're fun, so if money is not a concern for you, it's not something that I would say would be bad to add to your collection. I think these are truly very enjoyable range toys. I have to constantly pull myself back from not purchasing more PCC type guns because they're a perfect size for me. They're cheaper to shoot being a 9mm, and they are a lot of fun to run drills with, things like that. So I get it, I do. But I can see where the TMP fell off and didn't have a lot of sales. This is supposed to be the upgraded version, and it definitely still leaves a bit left to be desired. Can only imagine what the TMP felt like to shoot. Probably not as ideal. I'd still like to get my hands on one and try it though. But this is probably a nice short and sweet one. That's kind of all I had for you guys on this. I was excited to shoot it and a little disappointed in the aftermath, but that's okay. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you on the next one. Okay.